Traveling the Vortex.
We've joined Renegade Name Changer as he travels the Vortex and arrive at episode 530. Would you like Satsuma? I'm Keith.
I'm Sean.
I'm Glenn.
How are you guys?
Pretty good. How are you?
I am fighting something. I don't know what.
Uh-oh.
It's on the verge of a cold or something. Gemma has an ear infection and possibly strep.
Good Lord.
So
You guys can't catch a break, can you?
no, we're dropping like flies. Sarah's had a sinus infection for like 3 weeks.
I was gonna say, you guys have been sick off and on for like the last 3 months. Just keep
Ever
passing
since
it
Gemma
around.
went back to school.
Yeah.
Those school germs.
Yeah. That'll do it. Bring that home.
Yep.
Just Lysol the kid before you send her out the door before she comes home.
Hopefully this means by the time Liam actually goes to school, he'll have a nice, strong immune system.
You're building up herd immunity for your kid.
Exactly.
I'm surprised you haven't just started bringing stuff home from the lab.
We don't want that sort of stuff.
Yeah, no kidding.
That's a lot nastier than what we have here.
What do you got tonight on chicken pox? Oh, all right.
Yeah. Keith gets home and he's grateful for the low-grade viruses that they have at his house.
Yeah, the ones that you can't really test for.
Did you guys do anything this week besides have sick kids and be sick?
I finished a book called The Space Between Worlds.
I think I've heard of it. I can't remember what it's about, but I think I've heard of it.
It's about a future Earth that has learned how to travel to multiverses.
Yes. Okay, I do. I remember seeing that somewhere.
It was
Probably on your Goodreads. It's probably where I'm. Now that I think about it, I think that's where I saw it.
Well, I found it on Goodreads too because it was on like last year's best of lists that you get to vote on. So it was one of the sci-fi books that was in the running for best of. And it was okay. It wasn't fantastic. It didn't deal as much with the multiverse stuff as I would have hoped. I mean, it's there and it's presence, but it's more like she goes to this other universe and then comes back and you get to learn anything about that universe because she's dealing with other things going on. And it took a little bit to kind of get, because it's future Earth instead of like present day Earth, the entire society is completely different. So there's a steep learning curve at the beginning of the book, trying to get the hang of, okay, what's going on with this world and how does everything work and all this sort of stuff. And while she does explain it, there's a lot of it the author has the narrator explain the multiverse stuff really well, but the actual societal things you're just expected to catch up on. So that was my only complaint, was I felt like I was playing catch up too much in order to enjoy the story when she wasn't traversing the worlds. But other than that, it was pretty good. Worth reading.
Everybody see Werewolf by Night already?
I have not yet.
Oh, no.
You are missing out.
You are missing out. It's good. You'll have to definitely watch that when the kids are in bed. But
yeah,
I think and I could tell it was going to be this way, but I think it's a perfect homage to both the classic Universal films of the 1940s and the Hammer films of the 1970s. It kind of feels like somebody just like took and shoved those together and took the best of both worlds, and then a really, really good story too. So. How about She-Hulk? Have you finished She-Hulk?
You did not get to that tonight.
I was going to say, you were probably so busy tonight you couldn't get to it. Putting the kids down.
That and today is the day we took Gemma to the doctor. So after work. So Didn't get to that, and I'm still an episode behind on Andor.
Yeah, well, Sean and I haven't even started Andor. We were just talking about that before the meeting.
You are so far ahead of us on that one.
Well, there we go. Well, and I'm caught up on House of the Dragon. I'm staying up there. So,
well, let's save She-Hulk until next time. So, Sean, did you watch anything?
Yeah, nothing to write home about.
All right.
Other than, Werewolf by Night and She-Hulk and the aforementioned goodies. So staying up with Quantum Leap, which I'm thoroughly enjoying. Episode 3, I guess I'm still technically an episode behind now, but episode 3 leaned really hard into the, yes, this is a continuation, and the mythos and the lore that had come before. And the hand link, original hand link, made an appearance.
Oh, wow.
And I told Mel, it was like, if this thing lights up and squeals at some point in time in a former episode, I'm going to squeal. I'm warning you now. It just sat there in this episode, but if they actually use it, then I might just lose it myself. So.
I think the thing that discouraged me was recently I saw an interview with Scott Bakula, and he said he is not reprising his role. He wasn't going to come back to it. Now, he could be lying because they want to. I think
he's lying.
They want to make a big surprise about it, but he seemed pretty genuine in the interview.
I have a theory, which I'm hesitant to share at the risk of spoiling anything. If you're interested, I'll off mic. I'll throw it out there. But
okay. All right. Well, I didn't watch anything. I didn't watch anything particular either. I did. We finished She-Hulk. We all really enjoyed the ending of that. I won't go any further than that because there's nothing you could say about She-Hulk this week that wouldn't spoil things. So, I really enjoyed it. I thought, like I say, Werewolf by Night was really good. But I think that's all that I really watched. I don't typically watch much television, so that's it.
They all say, who is Doctor Who?
Do you collect Doctor Who? Do you have Doctor Who items and you don't know you collect Doctor Who? For all things in the Doctor Who collecting world, tune in to the Doctor Who Collectors Podcast, a Direction Point Network podcast. I am Larry Van Rosbergen, your host, and I have been collecting Doctor Who for 40 years. With popular features like collection protection and the most outrageous offer, we have a lot of fun. Available anywhere you get your podcasts. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point Network podcast.
All right, well, I don't see that we had any big news since we recorded last, so let's go ahead and dive right into it and start our review. This week we're doing The Eighth Doctor, Time War, Volume 2.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions. Doctor Who, The Eighth Doctor, The Time War, Volume 2.
So I look at these thick glass walls, the jungle out there, the creatures that roam through it, the layer after layer of things to keep me confined, and I wonder. I must have been the most evil man in the universe.
They've taken away my past, my future, my whole life. It's all gone!
Why do you think you were sent to Skaro to prevent their creation? If you'd carried out your mission, the Time War would have been averted. Instead, every death that has resulted is the result of your cowardice.
What are you doing here?
Blowing up this entire submarine and everyone on it.
A little old lady, sweetness in twin set and pearls. Don't be fooled, Bliss. She's one of the most dangerous villains in the universe.
You are to be exterminated!
Look, if we're about to totally explode, I'm not sure swimming's gonna help.
This will be just the start. The first of hundreds of worlds, thousands.
You're a near immortal renegade from beyond the stars. Far be it from me to take you off, but your war is over.
Big Finish. We love stories.
The Lords of Terror. When the Doctor takes Bliss to her home colony, they discover that the Time War has gotten there first. Bliss finds her world altered beyond recognition after the population working and the population working to serve new masters. No dissent is allowed. The Daleks are coming. The planet must be ready to fight them.
I'm not sure how I felt about this one. There are elements of this that I really liked, but I don't know cohesively that it worked for me. Somebody else start.
There were parts of it I liked too, but it also was overly predictable.
Yeah.
I could see the writing on the wall that the Time Lords were behind what they were doing, what was going on there, and obviously, I mean, it's the idea that, you know, the Doctor is taking Bliss back home and things aren't right. Oh, that's interesting. That's cool. And how she just takes it all in stride is pretty impressive also. I kind of expected a breakdown of some sort from her, you know, with the idea that her parents never or died and she probably never existed. Whoa, that's a normal, I guess not a normal person, but a lesser character would have a complete breakdown and be useless the entire episode, and she wasn't. So
Rose.
Yeah. Good point. So I really appreciated that. But then when we just kind of go along and discover, I was a few steps ahead of the idea that the Daleks had never actually come and attacked. And then I didn't necessarily see what the Time Lords were doing. But then as soon as I realized that there were Time Lords there, I figured they were behind it and were doing something nefarious. And they were. And it wasn't very clear what the true end goal of the planet being a missile silo really was, other than its missiles. I mean, it seemed rather pedestrian for the Time Lords to try to utilize.
What I thought was, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, that's I was just going to comment to that. I liked that idea of utilizing the whole planet basically as just a launching point for all these, because I imagined it was like a multitude of these missiles that they had planned for in order for this attack. And I liked the idea that they were, well, I didn't like the idea, but it was a neat idea that they were using the planet and convincing the inhabitants that they were protecting themselves from this Dalek war. I kind of liked that concept, and I liked the concept, but I'm with you on, I think that the predictability level of it was there. My biggest problem with it was I think Bliss reacted too subtly to what had happened. I also didn't want somebody that broke down and was worthless for the rest of the episode, or even for a extended amount of time. But I think I wanted a little more of her rationale and reasoning with it and coming to grips with it. I think that's where they missed it, is they didn't go far enough for her for it to affect her, and so that was my problem.
In some ways, at least what I got out of it is I think they were kind of taking Genesis of the Daleks and flipping it. It felt like the kind of core nuts and bolts story with, we're building this rocket and we're going to go throw it at that dome and do that. Well, we're going to take that idea, but we're going to make the Time Lords responsible for it, and we're forcing the population to work on it and doing all. It's like, okay, I kind of see where you're going from here, and doing it from the other perspective is kind of a neat idea. But I don't know that we necessarily got enough of that for it to really work, because we kept bumping up against all the other, well, like Keith said, it was just, it was predictable from the standpoint that, it's the Time Lords, of course, and it just for everything they set up when the reveal came, it felt so, they kind of went ta-da, and we went, well, yeah, was that all you had for us? It was like a second-rate magician. They kept pulling the curtain back, and we went, well, of course, what else have you got? And then they would sulk off and go, well, what about this? And we were like, we know. And it just never really seemed to get any traction to go anywhere. liked the concept, but I just there were parts of it that were really well done. I don't want to necessarily take that away from it, but Bliss continues to impress me with she's turning into just a really, really fantastic companion. And I think this is another example of that, is that not necessarily that she didn't have a reaction, because she does. She has a pretty strong one. And she rolls with the punches better than most, not only at her planet being, her history being rewritten, but then trusting this woman who turns out to be a Dalek agent, and then having that rug pulled out from under her, and realizing that, okay, now the doctor's going to call the Daleks to fix the problem, which that I will admit was one area where I genuinely thought for a moment he was going to do it.
Yeah.
He kind of walked that right up to the edge, and there was a part of me that was still going, oh, surely not.
Yeah.
But maybe.
See, I'm not impressed by Bliss at all. I don't think that they've been doing anything with her except for her being there. She almost feels like a tag along. She was set up as this, engineering marvel in that story that we had with River Song, where she was going back and she was supposed to be collecting companions for, was it the 11 at that time? I can't remember which incarnation it was, but maybe the 9. I can't remember which one of them. Anyway, and so I think my expectations were higher, but I feel like in both of these box sets, she's just kind of there. She's not doing anything. She's not a bad character. I'm not hating her or thinking that she's worthless, but I don't feel like they're doing enough with her. I think she's just kind of been a tag along so far. You're right. She does take things more in stride than a lot of companions we've had. She hasn't been the necessity of continuing to ask the Doctor why, because I think we find that with companions, especially when writers don't know how to convey information to the listeners or the viewers. They tend to use the companions to ask those questions as a surrogate for the viewer. They're not needing to do that in any of these stories, and maybe that's why I feel like they're underutilizing her. But I'm also appreciative of the fact that she's not there to be the, why are we doing this, Doctor? Why are we doing that, Doctor? Who is this, Doctor? She's not having to do that, so I appreciate that. But
yeah, I agree with you that she hasn't really been given much to do from a genuine companion, go and do this standpoint.
Yeah.
But as far as the questioning standpoint of it, I think that also has to do with the fact that, once again, we've gotten a companion from a future world versus a primitive or present day Earth one.
Or now no world at all.
or no, well, yeah. Anytime we deal with a companion that is from Earth, that is genuinely acting as the surrogate for the audience, we get those questions. Anytime we have a primitive, we get those questions because we are expected to, they've entered this world of magic and sorcery, and we have to kind of explain things to them. But with a companion that is from a relatively with it time period, I think the Doctor steps back just a little bit and doesn't have to play Mr. Wizard.
Right, and I appreciate that. I
do too.
I can tell they're doing
the breaks from time to time with stuff like that, and I wonder if the writers adapt to that. That that we purposely get put in situations where we don't have to explain things, or if it just kind of comes with the territory that you just automatically roll with it.
Yeah. Well, we definitely got 3 premier writers with this box set, so I think that's probably answers the question as to why they don't have to formulate the questions for us, because they know how to present a story without having to spoon feed some things to the listener.
Yeah, that could be too.
Yeah.
I also just kind of assume that some of her taking things in stride and not needing explanations or asking a lot of questions is based off of her, her education and the fact that she was off to go to observe a temporal anomaly when it everything went wrong, essentially.
Yeah.
And she wound up on the Theseus. So she has a temporal background, so she can kind of grasp the concepts and roll with things fairly easy. And she seems like the type of character that won't let herself become a victim.
Yeah. I do think the what I really enjoyed was the exchange between Carvel and the Doctor were just really impressive, especially in that dialogue where he calls the Doctor calls Carvel a good Dalek, and Carvel calls him a coward. There's that whole exchange surrounding that was just really intense, and Paul McGann again. We keep singing the praises of McGann and his performances, but he really turns in a stellar performance again.
Yeah, agreed. That was another element that I really liked, and the moral and ethical arguments that were presented there, I was very pleased with, because it wasn't just a madman, wanting to nuke the bad guys. It wasn't just a revenge plot. It wasn't just we've got to win the war. It wasn't your typical Time Lord.
No.
Rigmarole. There was some genuine thought process.
Yeah, understandable motives in it. You can really kind of sympathize with the decisions that were made. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And another one of those, on the balance sheet of things. Again, not that it's not horrible, because it is, but if we're talking about the entire galaxy or the entire universe, all of time, all of space, everything that's being consumed by this time war, is the fate of one planet in the scheme of things. If this could have ended it, if this genuinely had the ability to if they could have put all the data forward and said, here's the projections, here's the facts, this will work, would that have swayed him any? And I don't know the answer to that. I kind of like to think that the Doctor still would have said, no, it's not worth it, but because that's who he is.
Yeah, I think most of the time he would say that.
But yeah, so there were elements of it that I very much enjoyed. And again, Paul McGann.
Yeah.
He certainly makes the medicine go down, as it were.
Let's move on to Planet of the Ogrons.
Avoiding the Time War, the Doctor and Bliss are found by an old acquaintance, the latest incarnation of a criminal mastermind the Doctor knows of old. But unlike her predecessors, the 12 has a handle on her previous selves' unruly minds. There is a mystery to solve involving the Doctor's TARDIS and its unusual occupant, and answers will be found on the planet of the Ogrons.
Oh, I was hoping for the dun, Sean. I thought this one was a joy.
This one.
I
enjoyed this one a lot.
I really like this one.
This one frustrated me a little bit, because I feel like instead of as opposed to Time Lord Victorious and the Time War, we really should have been doing the 8 and the 9 and the 10 and the 11, and we should have been doing those stories in order.
It's fine. I don't think even Big Finish has done those stories in order.
No, they haven't. No, in fact, they've jumped around that particular Renegade's timeline a lot.
I was, I'm loath to admit this, I was lost through the first, third of the story, until they explained that the Daleks were inserting Ogrons into their own timeline. And the Doctor went,
clever.
Oh, and then I went, oh. And I felt like such a doofus for not getting that. And then it became oh, that's actually very clever. But then I was angry that you made me feel stupid. So it's totally on me. It's not the fault of the story at all. It's totally on me. But yeah, no, I kept listening to this Ogron talk and go, why are they insisting that this is the third Doctor as an Ogron? And I couldn't quite piece together how that worked until they got into it. And then it was like, oh, okay, that's actually kind of clever too. I mean, every time there was something that I didn't like about it, the story came along and held my hand and said, no, really, we thought about that. And here it is. And then they would spoon feed it to me. And I'd be like, okay. And I don't know why I kept butting up against it. I think I need to re-listen, because when all was said and done and we got to the end of it, I went, that was actually really good. What was my problem with this story? And I don't know. I genuinely don't know what my resistance was to it. So,
Well, let me ask you why did you something I keyed in on that you just said was why did you say the third Doctor is an Ogron? What gave you the impression that what gave you the impression it made you think it was the third Doctor is an Ogron?
there was a line where they referenced him having a cravat and not quite a smoking jacket, but
Frock
something.
coat. Frock coat.
Frock coat.
Yeah, well, but
Which is
that's
what the Eighth
that's what the Eighth
Doctor
Doctor's
wore
first.
originally.
Yeah, the Eighth Doctor's first outfit was the cravat
true.
and the frock coat, and that was the imagery immediately I got, and then later it was reinforced because the Eighth Doctor says, lose the cravat. That's
I've outgrown that.
Yeah, I've
that
outgrown
makes
that.
more
Yeah,
sense.
and so
I don't
yeah,
know,
I
just
was
the way the Ogrons
now.
talked, it sounded like they were doing a Pertwee thing.
Well, but I sort of wondered because there is the comment when he says, "You've called me a dandy and a clown," which is a third Doctor story where that is referred to. And then they also talked about the inserting the Ogrons into their own timeline, and that's what I thought was really clever was the fact that the doctor retroactively learns or remembers the story now of Day of the Daleks, which exists in his past with Ogrons, but it's almost as though we're getting a glimpse of a particular timeline where that hadn't quite happened yet, and now it has because it's retroactively happened. So I thought that was kind of clever how they tied that in, and they even made reference to that particular story as well.
Well, and it was such a brilliant way to do it because when the Eighth Doctor says the Ogrons are muscle, the Daleks don't need them. Why would they employ Ogrons? And I went, yeah. Why would they employ Ogrons? And all of a sudden, those classic stories just fell apart.
Yeah,
I mean, they just disintegrated. It was like, yeah, why would they deploy Ogrons? And then they held my hand and they fixed it.
Yeah,
like,
okay. Well, I think that's what's clever about it is they prop it back up right after that in order to make it even more sensible that they would be using those back then. So.
Oh yeah, looking at the artwork, that's totally a. Okay,
Yeah, I never got Third Doctor vibes. Also, just based off the album art.
Well, see, I never saw the album art on this one. I don't know why I didn't.
I didn't either, but okay, that fixes that.
The Doctor thing. I was certain that it wasn't the Doctor and that it was somehow memories or identity implanted in this Ogron. So I sort of felt that from the beginning. However, I really liked how they kind of bootstrapped it into this particular story. I don't often like that because I think sometimes that's a cheat. And in fact, in Susan's War, I think I've that was one of my issues with that particular story, one of those particular stories in that one, the one with the Eighth Doctor. But I think it was kind of clever in this one because it makes sense that, especially since we're going with a story where the Daleks are inserting Ogrons into their timeline, it's almost like meta in the way that they're inserting this Ogron back into this particular story. And so I thought that was cool.
Oh, now, John
Coleshaw. Well.
Yes.
Doesn't he do the Third Doctor?
He does.
He does, yeah.
Maybe that's where I got it from.
That could be why.
Okay.
You might have heard some Third Doctor in there because
I subconsciously picked up on that probably.
I don't know how you
I'm
heard
sorry,
it.
Keith.
I'm not sure how you heard any Doctor in it. It just sounded like a grunty Ogron that just happened to be a little more intelligent.
Nah, he totally had some Doctor mannerisms hidden beneath the grunts and.
That was part of what was also enjoyable was they interacted with each other like they were like the Ogron was a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the Eighth Doctor responded to him like he would have if it were the Seventh Doctor or the Sixth Doctor. I mean,
eventually
it was
Eventually,
once he kind of accepts that, oh yeah, this is me, and then they're bickering and fighting and switching up sonics and it felt like a multi-Doctor story.
I think the one that really grounds it too is that he's finally accepted that this isn't a dupe, that this is actually a doctor, is when he asks Dr. Ogron if you're going to. He said, "You know what I'm thinking," and he says yes, and then he takes Bliss, and it was like they were at that point they were in sync and connected, and the doctor wholeheartedly trusted that this was the right thing, and so that was really cool.
And then both of them going, I'm the doc. He's the doctor. I'm the doctor. I trust him to do this because he's me.
Yes, yes.
That was it synced up really nicely.
It did.
And even though this was Time War adjacent and related to Time War, it felt like such a sidestep from the Time War that it gave it a different flavor and a different tone for me.
100%, and I think that was another thing I liked about this is because one of my complaints last week was the fact that I feel like they're bringing the Eighth Doctor just a little too close to the Time War, because it never was in the I always got the impression that he's just stayed as far away from it as he could, and so I agree. This one feels like he's enough adjacent that it doesn't feel like he's involved, and that the first story sort of, although inadvertently he stumbled into it, but the first story again felt very much like he's in the Time War. So yeah, this one I appreciated for that exact reason.
And the Time War aspect gives it bigger stakes, but this story could fit in any other box set for the Doctor, without that many changes, if any at all.
Yeah, absolutely.
I love 12.
The 12 is great.
The 12 is great.
She was such a phenomenal character.
And interesting that she, the Time Lords are obviously calling up everybody, even in the Renegades, and to give her that inhibitor that suppresses her past selves. And she really, this particular incarnation really seems to have a grasp on things and a willingness to help, at least perceived willingness to help the Time Lords in this Time War, in this situation. So I liked where they start with this character in this story.
Yeah,
that was great. It's another example, I think, of Bliss being a great companion, because once she is presented with the facts that, this Ogron is you, and she's like, okay. I mean, she's even more accepting of it than the Doctor is.
Yeah, initially she is.
And much, much quicker. And
she helps convince him.
Yeah. Well, because the Doctor, quite honestly, is, I don't want to say racist, but he comes across as very kind of almost cruel, demeaning to the Ogron initially. When he's describing, well, they're stupid, well, they're this, they're, and admittedly,
but
he's not wrong.
It's not.
Admittedly, you can play dead and they'll bypass you.
Yeah, it's not out of character for 8, because 8 has, every time he engages with a enemy race or whatever, he is very much, this is how they are, no giving. He very much, in a lot of stories, he has done that. So it's not out of character for him to treat the Ogrons like that as well.
Yeah. And specifically the enemy races.
Yes, right.
Whereas with anybody else, he'll kind of give him the benefit of the doubt. With the bad guys, if it's somebody that he's run into before, he kind of defaults to, whatever the worst possible thing I can call you is, that's what you're going to be called.
Right.
But yeah, Bliss was just, okay, no, this is, you should calm down a little bit, because I think we should tack on with this and see what's going on. And then there was the ending where, well, first of all, I got to talk about the plan. The fact that, okay, we went and talked to the Ogrons and tried to convince them to fight, and
they wouldn't.
It was kind of the reverse ends. We're not going to have this long conversation. We're just going to say, come fight. No. Okay. So then what are we going to do now? We're going to go talk to the gods. Okay. And we're going to bring the gods back to the Ents, and the gods are going to tell them to go fight. And they're going to go, okay.
Yeah.
What a great plan. It's just,
I mean, the Doctor is not wrong. They are not smart creatures.
Yeah. But I mean, it's stroke of genius. That was some next level convincing right there.
And there's no dilly-dallying about it. It's you go to one level and that doesn't work, and immediately he's on to the next level. And I liked that. It was just, it tracked right along.
Yeah, I mean, it's like cutting out the bureaucracy.
Fall asleep.
Right.
Yeah, we're not going to deal with we're not going to the prime minister. We're going straight to God. That was, man, the Doctor should do that more often. He should just go to the deity, man.
And then they pull a doctor's daughter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe that. I thought when it was happening and I heard the regeneration, when I heard it, I went, this is not regenerating, is he? And he does. And I thought, oh, that was really cool that they went there. I didn't expect that.
Now I want to know how he's different, though.
Well, I think that the one problem that I have with that is it's, for the most part, although I guess what was the overseer? What was he called? What were they calling him?
The overseer.
So the overseer, I guess he is manipulating DNA as well. So it's not just implanting consciousness. He did also in some way. He was
trying to fuse the two together.
Yes. So I suppose maybe the element in there of regeneration could be transferred that way. But that was just absolutely surprising.
And it works even more so retroactively with our knowledge of the Timeless Child, and how the Time Lords basically took regenerations from the Doctor in order to give themselves regeneration. So it gives more credence to that now too.
Let's please not do that.
That's certainly true. No, that's a good point, Keith. I completely now want a box set of Jenny and Dr. Ogron out doing adventures together. I think that would be brilliant. Make it happen, Big Finish. Make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, if we can get 19 box sets of, Jago and Lightfoot. Nothing against Jago and Lightfoot, but I mean, of all of the spinoffs that Big Finish has delivered on, you've got this guy? I mean, come on. This is the show, man. Yeah, I was shocked that it was like, of course they're going to kill him off. Oh, here he goes. Yeah, the sacrifice play. Okay, wait, what do you mean he survives? And he's got a TARDIS.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, it gets a dun-na. A retroactive dun-na.
Hello, fellow time travelers, and welcome to the Doctor Who Target Book Club podcast, the only podcast to discuss, in story order, all the Doctor Who novelizations. My name is Tony Whitt, and every 2 weeks or so, I'm joined by a 2 to 3 person discussion panel, including our so-called expert who's been a Who fan since 1979. That would be me. We also get the views of intermediate, casual, and novice fans who either have never seen the show or who have never read these books until these podcasts, including
Dalton Hughes
and
Alison Fitz-Seyfried.
You can find us on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, or wherever you find good podcasts, or even ones like ours. You're listening to Traveling the Vortex, a Direction Point podcast.
All right, well, let's move on to the next one.
In the Garden of Death. In a prison camp like no other, the most dangerous man in the universe is held in isolation. The rest of the inmates have no memory of who they were or what they might have done. No memory even of their captors until the interrogations begin.
I feel like I was in this camp because I have no memory of why we were in this camp. What the plot was.
It is a very middling story. There's not a lot going on here, and I need your guys' help with something. I understood why the Doctor was in such high security because of who he was, and they even gave him the designation Alpha. But did the Daleks uncover the information from the 12 in this, and that's why? Because the information that she's basically suppressed in her many identities, they got the information right during maybe one of the interrogations or something.
For the next story.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
That's what I got
So so I did follow that then. So why was she not considered more of a danger than she was? It seems like she was.
She should have been alpha.
Yeah, maybe not alpha, but at least on the same. Make her beta, But they seem to give her too much freedom, and again, they talked about how Daleks are not imaginative, so they don't they don't think outside of just logic. But I would have still thought the Daleks would have felt that she possesses at least this knowledge. She has a certain degree of power and danger about her. Why didn't they put her under more protection than allowing her to kind of roam around and, use half, what an android? I don't think it was an android. He was, what do you call a cyborg? Utilizing a cyborg so that she could, sabotage the fence and the electric grid, yada, yada, yada. So I just kind of felt like that she was being under scrutinized by the Daleks.
I could be wrong.
So
go ahead, Keith.
I got the impression that they stumbled across this information during
Agreed.
the interrogations.
Agreed.
So that wasn't necessarily that they were interrogating her to find out this stuff.
I agree.
They just came across it. So
but I think it's
they probably just underestimated her initially.
I suppose
until
that's
they
true.
discovered that information and assumed the doctor is the doctor, so he knows everything and he'll give us the most information eventually and can free everybody, whereas the 12 they look at and they underestimate and don't think they're going to get anything of value out of.
Right. No argument that they wouldn't have put the doctor under high security. No argument there. Yes,
I also think it happened late.
Well, then that's what I was going to say. So do you suppose they must have stumbled across it very shortly before she sabotages things and orchestrates her escape?
Yeah,
that would make sense to me.
Even now, correct me if I'm wrong, because I'll be honest, as middling as this story was, I was starting to kind of zone out on it a little bit. Don't they take her after she gets to the tower for an interrogation, and then the doctor does his flip and beams all the Daleks down to the planet and all the people up to the ship? Wasn't she gone?
I think so.
That wasn't the impression that I got, but
no, because wasn't she with them all when they
did the flip and rode on the, what do you say, the coattails of the transmat beam. Now I think their intention was to transmat her out, and they were going to bring her in for interrogation, but that's when the doctor flips it and ends up transmitting all of them the opposite direction. So I don't think she was taken. Don't think she was ever separated beyond that point. No, but I could be wrong.
It would have had to have been the time right before that they got the information.
Yeah,
and maybe that's what triggered the awakening of one of the previous. That would make sense. That whatever they did to her in the previous interrogation awoken one of her previous selves, and that's why she kind of started to behave a little differently.
Yeah,
it's not really attacked, but was willing to sacrifice the guy.
Well,
his leg, and
it's somehow alluded to, and I can't remember if it was this one or maybe it was at the end of the last one where that her inhibitor is broken too. So that was another reason.
At the beginning of this one, I think.
Yeah, that was another reason that it was allowing for her other her other regenerations to come forward now.
Yeah, because we kind of learned in the next one that she is obviously not to jump too far forward, but a Dalek spy, and which gets implanted because of the interrogations, and therefore I would assume that's when the inhibitors are broken, when they flip her essentially.
Yeah, because even at the end of this, I think Tamazin, she was asking for the inhibitor to be repaired. Yeah. She was asking Alestra.
But yeah, regardless, this was one of those that's like there was a whole lot of nothing going on, and it felt like realistically this was all set up to give that one piece of information for the next story.
Yeah, agreed.
And it was like, well, you could have just given us that piece of information for the next story, and you didn't need this one at all.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in Dalek prison. Dalek prison stories are really never very interesting.
It did open it up for some good dialogue too, because the doctor, presuming that he had been tortured before and kind of rationalizing that because he either was a torturer or was has been tortured, also knew very much enough about the prison. He also speculates near the beginning, that, obviously there's an enemy, but are they the bad guys or are we, kind of thing. And I thought that was a neat conversation he had with Bliss about that.
Yeah, but right off the bat, it's like, oh, Paul McGann lost his memory.
Okay, well, here we go again.
I think this would have been a better story at the beginning of a box set than the third one in.
Yeah,
like if
probably.
we had started a box set in this situation, I would have been, okay, what's going on? How did they get here? Why do they not have their memory? I would have been I would have bought into it a lot more, and I've been a lot more interested. As it is, I'm like, okay, well, let's just get to the point so I can know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Well, and it sort of, now that I'm thinking back, I felt like the capture at the end of the last one felt a little forced, and I'm almost wondering if that was written in order to move into this story. Accommodate this story. Yeah. All right, well, let's do the last one, Jonah.
In the depths of an ocean world ravaged by the Time War, the weary survivors are pressed into service by Cardinal Elistra. Something is hidden beneath the sea. The 12 knows the truth, if only she could drag it from her jumbled mind. And when the Doctor becomes the captain of a submarine boat, all omens spell disaster.
But I love submarine stories.
Every time he does the enthusiastic one, he ends up clipping out his microphone and we can't hear him. I can always tell because I hear the...
He overmodulates it.
I even backed up.
Well, you still clipped it out. This one started out, and I thought, okay, ocean world, submarine. Now we're again borrowing from Earth norms in order to tell a story about Time Lords that shouldn't necessitate a submarine, but it works because they explain the characterization of this world and this ocean, and why time travel doesn't work in this ocean, and there are certain constrictions that they have, and so exactly. So it makes sense that they have to go by a more primitive means, and it's not even the Time Lords have basically confiscated this crew and crews, all of this, whoever. I can't remember if they said what the name of the people were, but they've basically commandeered the things that they need in order to go find this, whatever the Daleks are digging for. So it worked when they kind of explained it and drilled it down that way.
Yeah, right off the bat, it was like, what? Why does this sub-captain sound like Paul McGann? What is going on here? What are we doing? Oh, it is Paul McGann. Oh, what are you? I don't know if I'm going to like this. And then we get Elistra spelling it out for us in the very next scene, and it was like, oh, okay, cool. I'm on board with this. Let's go. I'm ready. Now that you give me, yes. And I just kind of went nuts for all of it. I'm a big sub fan, so I like sub stories, and this had all the tropes of a submarine movie, and the running silent, and we're going to crash, and we have to blow the tanks, and depth charges, and all of that stuff is like, yeah. But then it also, I mean, we have Daleks that are kamikazing the sub because energy weapons don't work. That's cool. There were just enough trappings of the why are we doing this sub story that I was okay with it.
Yeah.
It was a little frustrating because it was like this was almost a perfect setup for, I don't know, maybe I had the Third Doctor on the brain. You could have done this as a Third Doctor story on Earth with Unit, and you could have put him on a sub in this kind of adventure setting, and it would have been great.
Yeah.
But I was okay with where they went with it and everything until we got to the end, and then it kind of felt like, oh, it's another like the War Master looking for the heart of the planet that's going to be a huge thing to destroy people with.
Right.
And it's intelligent, and we're kind of rehashing that story again. Okay.
When you set up a story in such a way that your MacGuffin is the ultimate threat to the universe and everything, then sometimes writers tend to default to the misunderstood entity or beast, and I sort of even saw that coming, that the Daleks would end up creating their own demise because they know they can't control this thing. It's too dangerous. And then I even saw the offering from the entity, I can't remember what they keep calling it, to Olestra, and the Doctor having to say, no, wait, and stepping in. So it just felt very tropish on when you've set something up to be this omnipotent thing. The omnipotent thing has to be the solution, and nobody else can. And that's what they did again with this.
Yeah, I love the sub tropes and did not like the sci-fi tropes.
Yeah.
You totally know that when it's set up that way, that ultimately the omniscient thing is not going to survive and no one's going to get its powers because nobody could.
Right.
There's no way that anybody's going to walk away with that ability.
Right.
You know who could have walked away with it? Dr. Ogron. Just saying.
I'm with you, Sean. I really enjoyed the ride, but I just think it falls flat at the end just because of what we discussed there. So,
yeah.
Overall, it was a good box set. It's a bit uneven, for sure, but I think it tells the narrative, with the exception of the first one, probably feeling a little out of place. And I think I saw somewhere or maybe it was in the. Where did I see it? I think I read that it was originally the first story of this box. It was supposed to be a John Hurt War Doctor story, and then he passed away, so they had to change some of the settings. In fact, I think if I remember right, this was supposed to have him ending up in 1984 in a dystopian world, yeah, and being very meta in that way. So. But I think overall, I enjoyed the box set. I didn't dislike it, regardless of the fact that the Prison Planet one is a bit meddling. I felt, again, Bliss. I think she finally sort of feels like she's coming into her own, for me anyway. You guys obviously have a different feeling, but I think she starts to feel like she's coming into her own now because she's kind of now that sympathetic being, and she also feels like she has something to do now because she's having to take over comms when the one gal dies. She and the Doctor split up to go find the 12 when the 12 has escaped and run off, and so she felt like she was actually being utilized in this one. So I think she's fun. She's coming along, and I don't dislike Bliss whatsoever. I don't want to make it sound like I think she's worthless, but I really want to see them to continue to bolster her and do more with her character.
Yeah, both the last story and this one had a lot more Bliss and a lot more Bliss doing things and being having her own agency of what she's going to be doing too.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think where your frustration probably comes from is after the first story, from the first box set with Bliss, where she's really fleshed out and established. And when they're, or maybe not the very first story, maybe the one where they're trekking across the jungle world.
That's the one that I think she's fleshed out in. Yeah, the first story I got confused with who she was. So.
But with that one, and she's kind of, I mean, heck, she's in charge of a Dalek at that point. So kind of right off the bat, she's, being given things to do and establishing herself and her rapport with the Doctor and how that all fits together. So kind of right off the bat. And yes, as a companion, she has taken a back seat to a lot of the goings on in this one especially. But I think they're going to get there. I hope they get there.
Yeah.
I hope she doesn't become a Chariz or, some of the other Eighth Doctor companions that have come and gone that just like never really did much.
Lots of potential, and then they just kind of fizzle like they don't know what to do with them.
Yeah.
You are invited on an adventure across all of time and space. In a completely random order. It's the Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. Jump in the TARDIS with your hosts,
Eric Gulbranson, Asad Kheshki,
and
Matthew Kressel.
Explore Doctor Who TV stories, audio adventures, and books, both novels and non-fiction. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast. It's the entire Whoniverse. On shuffle. The Police Box in the Junkyard podcast is a member of the Direction Point Network and is available about once a month wherever you find your podcasts. You are listening to Traveling the Vortex.
All right, Sean, what do we got coming up on the schedule?
Well, I don't know if you guys had heard, but Doctor Who's back.
Well, not yet, but it will be by the next time we record.
Will be by the next time we record. So The Power of the Doctor, the finale of the Jodie Whittaker years, coming soon to a television set near you, and thus coming soon to a podcast near you. We will put the brakes temporarily on our Time War reviews in order to bring you all the goodness that is the new Who, and then give you our thoughts on that, which I'm sure will probably run long. Going out on a limb here. And then we will take kind of an extended break because we're going to be going and talking about a project near and dear to my heart with the Temporal Logbook 3. We've gotten our review copy from our good friends over at Pencil Tip Publishing, and we'll be delving into the goodies of it and all the short stories therein, and delivering detailed reviews on those stories for all of you, and trying to convince you to go out and order a copy if you haven't already.
Now, I'm not going to be lost because we didn't review part 1 and part 2, right?
Not to my knowledge.
I know it's an anthology book.
Not to my knowledge. I suppose that's a fair question. No, it's an anthology of Doctor Who short stories, one for each Doctor. And the theme of the book is Changed Lives, and it's all about how an encounter with the Doctor can alter your trajectory of your life, either for good or for ill. So I'm very curious to see what other people have put together.
And then, of course, we'll on the other side of that, we'll bring back the Time War and continue on from there. All right, well, be sure to check out our website, travelingthevortex.com, for updates on the podcast. If you get any value out of the podcast, why not consider putting some value back into it? You can do that by clicking on our Patreon link and consider supporting us. If you already support us, thank you very much. And we actually have 2 pieces of new content out there. So if you're not subscribed, you can become a patron. And it only takes, I think, $1 a month in order to be a patron and help us out and help us keep this show going. And you get a few little extras as well. Also, please consider giving us a 5-star review wherever you subscribe to this podcast. I've noticed a few more aggregators have picked us up now, so we're making the rounds out there. Just make sure you review us so that we can get in front of other listeners as well. And
thank you.
Yes, and make sure you join in the conversations in our listeners forum on Facebook. Well, if that is it for this time, until next time, I'm Glenn.
I'm Sean.
I'm Keith.
Cheers.
Good night, everybody.
Be seeing you.
Thanks for listening.
You have been listening to Traveling the Vortex. Doctor Who and all of its associated programs are owned and trademarked by the BBC. No infringement is intended or implied.
Direction point! Direction point!
A Doctor Who podcast network.